My father was chair of philosophy education at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm his deaf son. I never amounted to much, but I had a conversation with him once about a dissertation I was doing research for. He suggested, after hearing me out, why don't you call it God, Guns, and Rock and Roll? I called an article with the Pitt News that once in his honor. I've learned more than I care to about the fellow travelers of Hitler, Reagan, and Pink Floyd, and so on. In the 60s, when the war in Vietnam was started by fellow travelers of Hitler, Reagan, the John Wayne mercenaries, it was said that the people who were opposing the war, some of them leading from the rock industry, were fifth columnists out to deceive and delude our children. Well, they were only telling the truth. But who were they were fifth column of? They were fifth column of Hitler, Reagan, Rabbit. And they were starting an opium war to tax and human traffic anyone who dared to resist Hitler, Reagan. And of course, it all came clean when the Swami Nostra of the AIDS epidemic, Penis J. Sinfield, the lyricist for premature fornication with Mancini, PFM, sent his occult fellow traveler from the Zodiac Killers of Hair onto 60 Minutes with Colin Powell to monger weapons of mass destruction in the name of protecting the lawyers over Operation Death Seed. One of the curious things about these felons is that they tell the truth on the records and then hire lawyers to say it's just art. How's that grab you? One of the most truthful things they said was they talk about the jumble of lies they tell. And then they say, oh, that's just art. It's not just art. It's their characteristic and personality. They're a jumble of lies, and that's why it's hard to pin them down. Where do you get any sort of horizontal explanation, linear explanation that doesn't waffle out into the wah-wah zones of super hallucinogenic fourth dimensionalism from Johnny Winter's contributions to the Jimi Hendrix Museum? And they play totem, whoa, Scandinavians, right? Lying about everything. There's nothing that you can think of that they don't lie about. And then in the jumble of lies, they infamously pull a rabbit from their hat and say, here's the truth. And while all this wah is going on in the background from their Pink Floyd laser show. What is the truth of the Stranger newspaper? The truth of the Stranger newspaper is, oh yes, we remember when Matt Crary came in to explain to us his investigation into a Venus flytrap operation, clocked eggs, and how we pretended to take him seriously while we planned to poison him in the mouth. And this was the brilliance of Seattle queers humanizing the plague. Rather than protect people, save lives, or investigate properly, they help set up COVID-19. And now they're playing the same old tapes, paranoid schizophrenia, dementia, delusions of grandeur. I mean, you just pull open the physician's desk reference and make things up. They sat still when I was banned from school. They refused to examine the evidence about King Crimson's art being used in the way that I was deafened, that it was a setup with Leslie Katz. They refused. They're Bernie Sanders' ticket to ride. And these Scandinavians, they call themselves, these stoic, ramrod, straight Scandinavian homosexuals, say, who cares about symbolic mouth poison crimes leading to COVID-19? The people who did it are completely at large. They slapped them on the back. Hi, you really pulled the wool over the eyes of old Atlantia, didn't you? They don't care anything about a deaf poet banned from school. I was printed in Real Change. I was printed in the Chinook Coupon book. This printed in Asian called Cinema, Sinise, Northwest Asian Weekly. Some of my best writing appeared in the Seattle Times forum page about Ichiro. And people read it, applauded it, and circulated it. And I was banned from school. Nobody asked any questions about it. That's what the strangers. And how do they tie? They take the two sides of their fourth tongue, they tie a knot, and they say the mysterious word Ouroboros. And Pina Sinfield anoints them and says, "These are my acolytes. These are my guru disciples of the Swami Nostra, pedophat of the spiders from Mars, who you dare not cross." And they consider this Warpo world the standard of excellence in Capitol Hill, Seattle. The stupids at the Stranger consider themselves the standard of excellence in hippie culture in Seattle. It's the biggest loser zone in the psychological universe. It's a huge dip that sanctifies slurring innocent people to kill them. And they can't even see that that's what they're doing. They took sides with the people who are the most hostile slur meisters in the world, who absolutely hated the queers, couldn't set them up, couldn't wait to set them up, couldn't stand the thought of them getting away, and they came out and wiggle for the queers. They say, "We're wiggly. Look at us, we're neat." And the queers go, "Wow, they're wiggly, they're neat." So they can set them up. And they refuse to listen to any common sense or practice any common decency. Refuse. And how does that get started? Well, Ringo Starr comes with his foamy beard. They had these bearded women and these armed trannies from Auburn putting semen in my coffee cup at Red Elm over here. Poison criminals right before COVID happened. And they're wholly anointing people with these poison crimes. And they're the darlings of J. Edgar Inslee. Darlings. Fabulous. And they tie their forked tongue together and say the mysterious word Ouroboros. It comes untied, and Penis J. Sinfield comes down and anoints them. Says, "These are my recreational madmen." And they're dainty little girls. These girls are so mature in their 30s that they can't bear to go outside wearing any clothes that don't mock human femininity. They can't bear it. They're too mature.